You're listening to the Utah Checkdown Podcast. And now your host, Josh Furlong.
Welcome back to another edition of the Utah Checkdown Podcast. I am Josh Furlong. Happy to be back with you after what feels like an eternity. It's been a long time. I think the last episode that I did was on December 15th, back before we knew anything different about what life was like. So it's been chaotic. It's been crazy and entertaining all at the same time. So my apologies for not getting any podcasts out sooner. Obviously, I was hoping to do a little bit more previews of Nebraska, looking to recap some of the 2025 season, all that kind of stuff. And then Kyle Whittingham decided he wanted to go get another head coaching job. So that changed a lot. And I feel like all I've done is live on my phone for the last, 3 weeks and all that. And so there's definitely been a lot going on. As well as, my job is shifting a little bit with KSL. Nothing scary. I'm still going to be covering Utah. But it's changing a little bit, as I previously mentioned probably a month or so ago about kind of how we're merging together as a company. So it's a good thing. Steve Bartle and I, for a while have been kind of operating on different spectrums of the same brand, but eventually we will be able to come together and kind of work together. So looking forward to that, looking forward to not having to necessarily split efforts with him. And, I'm expecting to have a lot of fun with this kind of stuff. So just been a lot of change, a lot of different things that I've been having to do. And so unfortunately haven't been able to get a podcast out for you, and I apologize for that. So we're going to try to recap as much as possible without going too crazy. There's been way too much that's happened, and obviously there's a lot of this that you already know probably, but wanted to touch on a lot of this since there's a lot to download here, and we'll not get to everything, but we're going to try to do our best and try not to bore you. So just a little preview of what this episode will be. We'll briefly talk a little bit about Las Vegas and what happened there, Kyle Whittingham frustrations, the Morgan Scalley era, some coaching changes, roster retention, and portal happenings. So a lot to talk about there, and we'll get into that. But first, let me tell you about our partners at Canyon View Credit Union. Big dreams don't just belong in your imagination. At Canyon View Credit Union, we help turn those dreams into reality. From application to celebration, we're by your side every step of the way, because home isn't just a place, it's the people you share it with. At Canyon View Credit Union, flexible options and expert guidance help you create a home that's truly yours, the perfect place to gather and belong. Guiding you home, Canyon View Credit Union. To learn more details, visit canyonviewcu.com. All right, let's jump into this. So let's start with Las Vegas. We want to put a little bow on the 2025 season. I still want to get to the bold takes that we had at the beginning of the season with Josh Newman and Brian Brown that I want to be able to recap and just kind of see how things went. We went awry a little bit, but at the same time, they're bold takes, right? And so I want to get into that hopefully one of these days. We've got plenty of time to talk about that stuff, but clearly there's been a lot going on. So we'll get into that kind of stuff and fully put a bow on the 2025 season. But just talking about Las Vegas, it was an interesting time down there because 2 years ago when Utah went to Las Vegas, it couldn't have been more dead or depressing. It wasn't quite the 2024 season, but it was still one that was marred by injuries, and you're just kind of limping to the finish. And so you have that game also 2 days before Christmas, and so Las Vegas was dead. It was just kind of a weird feeling going into that game, and so there just wasn't a lot of excitement. Players still had fun, but it was different. And coming into this Las Vegas Bowl was a completely different vibe. Obviously, Utah was in a much better space, going 10-2, ranked 15th in the country. Going against a quality opponent that, they felt confident in winning, but there was just this renewed sense of life, right? And the players had a lot of fun. It seemed like there was a lot of excitement and a lot of focus still, and obviously that resulted in a win. And Utah blows out Nebraska. Really solid way to finish the season. You go with you only lose, or what am I trying to say? Sorry, you get 11 wins, which is only the fourth time in program history that Utah's done that, and so it's a really solid way to end the season, especially after a 5-7 campaign and all the frustrations that were in 2024. So, really solid that way. You could tell that the distractions, and there were many distractions, and none of which really felt like it was Las Vegas. That's always the one tripe that everybody comes on to is, Las Vegas is a major distraction, and it can be. But this was different, right? So there was a little difference here because the players and the media all stayed in the same hotel, and that generally doesn't happen. They like to keep the players and the coaches and everybody away, not just from the media, but the general public, just to kind of keep their focus, right? And obviously you're not usually in a place this long, and so it's kind of inevitable. And in Las Vegas, there's only so much you can do. But this is one of those rare situations where, you're interacting with players or coaches or different things inside the hotel that you're staying in. And so it was a unique experience. And this happened 2 years ago as well. But like I said, it was a completely different vibe. There's a lot of the players that are going down to the gambling tables, roulette, blackjack, whatever that may be, on a daily basis. And, some could say, oh, that's creating a distraction for them. If anything, it was more of just kind of an opportunity to enjoy time. And, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of that kind of stuff because that's their own thing. But it was an opportunity to kind of see these guys in their own personalities and everything in a different way than I see normally. And I usually get an even closer look than most fans. But this was kind of a really cool opportunity to kind of see how they operate and have fun. And but for all intents and purposes, a lot of these players had fun, and they did it in a responsible way. It wasn't a situation where they were out there causing problems or getting into situations that were damaging to their career. This was just simply a good time, and you could tell that with this team. But amongst all this, and we'll get into a lot of kind of what happened, but clearly Kyle Whittingham had taken the job to Michigan the week before Utah essentially left. It was actually like 2 days before Utah left on their trip, and so it was a little. Maybe it was a day actually. Yeah, sorry. Time is kind of off right now because everything is running together at this point. So anyways, Kyle accepts the head coaching job at Michigan on Friday. Utah was flying out that night to essentially, get there for the bowl game and start the bowl game festivities. And so Kyle flies out with the team, lets the team know in person that he's accepted the Michigan job, and then flies out to go join Michigan for their bowl game, which happened to be the same day. So, things happened really quickly. By the time the team landed in Las Vegas, Kyle Whittingham's news was all over. All the players knew. This wasn't a surprise, right? But it still came as a shock, and it could have been a major distraction for this team where suddenly you're going into this game trying to win one for your longtime head coach, and maybe there's some players that felt more loyal to him or whatever that may be. This could have been a major distraction for Utah, and crazy enough, it didn't. They stayed focused and everything was okay. Like I said, the players had fun. But amid all this, I'm walking along the halls with many of the coaches, saying hi to them, having very many conversations with them because I'm not trying to disrupt some of the stuff that they're doing. Many of these coaches are being linked to Kyle Whittingham going to Michigan. And so there's kind of this weird vibe of business as usual and just having fun while all these backdoor deals are happening and these conversations are being had about, can they stay at Utah? Are they going to Michigan? That kind of stuff. And so it was this really interesting dynamic of that aspect, as well as some players that were potentially, looking to go to Michigan. When this happened, there was this big worry that Utah was suddenly going to lose everybody and everything was going to be a disaster. And, clearly that hasn't quite been the case. And we'll get into some of that here shortly. But it was this major distraction that went on. And yet there was just kind of this quiet confidence from the team that everything was going to be okay, right? It didn't feel like this fazed them, and that was kind of the way this team operated this year. Devin Dampier was a great ally in that, where he just kind of kept the room together, and it wasn't just him, right? There was many other guys in that room. Dampier wasn't even a captain for this season. He was on the leadership team, but he wasn't a captain until the bowl game. There was a lot of players and veterans that just really kept this team going and pushing in the right direction. Even when they lose games, there was this next, mentality type of thing where you just kind of move on. And that's how Utah treated this as well. They had their purpose and they went for it, and clearly showed up in the Las Vegas Bowl in convincing fashion, right? It didn't look like it was going to start out that way. Nebraska goes and gets 2 quick touchdowns, and a lot of that came on the rushing attack that has killed Utah the last couple games of the season. And then suddenly it was, Utah finds a way, they stop everything, and everything was good for Utah, and they go on to dominate. So really solid performance all around from this team. Devin Dampier had the game of his life. Some people want to say that now that Kyle Whittingham's not in charge and there's no restrictions on the offense, you can see kind of what Utah did. And I don't know if there's that much that goes into this. The game plan was still relatively the same, but at the same time, Morgan Scalley was the one allowing things, and Jason Beck was just kind of in his bag, right? And they did a lot of stuff that moved the ball downfield. You saw a lot more passing. Utah was a much heavier passing team in that game than they'd have ever been. And it really was just solid, right? And all around from top to bottom, this was a team that completely dominated in the trenches. They dominated, in the passing attack. It's the rushing attack still. They put up 200 yards. This was a solid game plan that allowed Utah to really kind of show what the future can be. You did that also with your 2 all-star tackles not playing in the bowl game. And so, there's a lot of optimism about what this team can be, especially if you can keep the core pieces together and move this forward. So, really impressive stuff for this team, being able to go into Las Vegas where, there's a lot of natural distractions, but then just to add your former head coach going on to be a head coach somewhere else that wasn't expected, Morgan Scalley having to suddenly take over as head coach. Clearly he was going to be head coach, but this was still going to be Kyle Whittingham's last shot. And so trying to do that while still trying to manage roster turnover, including coaches, trying to do all that while preparing for a transfer portal. And so it was a really impressive effort for this team. Morgan Scalley gets his first win as head coach, and clearly gets emotional at the post-game press conference, or at the kind of the stadium trophy ceremony. And, this clearly means a lot to him. This is a guy that has put a ton into the Utah football program, and it just kind of capped off with his first win in Las Vegas, where it was convincing, right? And what a better way to start a career. So, really impressive effort. You hope for Utah's sake that this kind of translates into the 2026 season, that they can use this to kind of move forward. Obviously, there's going to be some different pieces. There's going to be a different core of players, and each season kind of presents its own challenges and success. And so we'll really see what happens over the next couple months on how Utah's able to build that, kind of the vibe that goes in there. But if they can keep the core together, if they can keep things moving in the right direction, I mean, this is a team that's still going to compete in the Big 12. They're going to be a team that is, in theory, in the playoff race. A lot of different things that are going to be happening that could make this team work. And you could start off the Morgan Scalley career in a really solid way. So, really, really exciting for Utah and Utah fans. That's a great opportunity for Utah to move forward, to keep the culture together, keep things moving forward, and to build off of, right? 11 wins is much better to build off of than 5 wins. And I think you're seeing that in recruiting. You're seeing that in kind of just the general vibe of this team and what's happening. If Utah was limping into the Las Vegas Bowl when Kyle Whittingham left, this is a much different situation, I believe. Probably because Kyle doesn't walk away, but also because I think just the general vibe of the team, it's harder to keep people together if things aren't going well. So we'll leave that with Las Vegas. We'll potentially look at a little bit more of that kind of stuff moving on, but we got a lot to talk about, and I don't want to bog us down too much with one little topic. So the next step is Kyle Whittingham, and this has become a controversial situation, right? On one hand, you have a longtime head coach of 21 seasons, more than that as overall in Utah, in the Utah football program, but 21 seasons as the head coach, clearly set a legacy. On his way out, there was talk of, Kyle Whittingham Field, building the statue. I mean, there was a lot of love for Kyle Whittingham, and kind of all that he was and is, and him taking a job to Michigan suddenly changed that. And, I want to give a little bit of perspective here because clearly there's a lot of animosity towards Kyle right now. And I don't want to say it's not merited to some extent. Obviously, this has been a tough time for the Utah football program because their longtime head coach decided to go take a job instead of walk away. But I think in time, this can kind of be eased, right? Especially if Morgan Scalley can kind of keep things together, if he can keep the roster together, a lot of that's going to be eased. The reality is anytime a head coach moves on, this is what happens to a program, right? The head coach moves on, they take a lot of staff, they take a lot of players, and they kind of start building out their program in their next area, hoping to be able to build upon what they've done in their previous spot. And so that aspect of it is not unusual, right? Kyle Whittingham leaving, taking a head coaching position, trying to take coaches that he feels comfortable with, players that he feels comfortable with, that is not unusual in this world. The tricky part here is that when Kyle Whittingham left, the whole conversation was he's leaving to set up Utah in a better situation, right? And a lot of people are getting stuck on that aspect of it. He planned on leaving Utah in a much better situation. And you can go both ways here, where him, him gutting the program, so to speak, is not leaving the program in a better situation. But I would take the standpoint that he has left it in a better situation, right? You set up your future success. You set it up with a seamless transition, one that potentially can go to even greater heights than what he was able to do with Morgan Scalley. And, the jury's still out on that. We'll see. It's easy to crown somebody right now in January and not have games played. But, this is one of those situations where the path is set, right? You're now building off of 11 wins, like I said, instead of building off of 5. You've got a program that is in a great spot. It's had years of success. You've got the head coach who has been a longtime member of the Utah staff, played for the program, has always respected Utah, wanted to be there. You're leaving this in a great spot. The trouble here is there's a lot of situations here where it's you're gutting the program in the sense that you're taking a lot of the coaches, you're presumably taking a lot of players, and as of now, that hasn't been as bad as many people expected. When Kyle Whittingham announced this, and there was this talk of moving to Michigan, the natural thought was everybody's going to go into the portal, and Utah's going to be left with nobody to play, right? And I don't want to say that there wasn't a situation where that's the case. I think Morgan Scalley has done a phenomenal job already of being able to maintain this roster and roster retention, and I'll get into most of that here shortly. But for the most part, this hasn't been as bad as it could have been. This absolutely could have been a worse situation, and then at that point, I think the legacy of Kyle Whittingham looks far different, right? I think if you're going into this and you do gut a lot of the roster and you do gut the coaching staff, this becomes a much more different and difficult conversation about what Kyle Whittingham's legacy will be at Utah. The reality is his legacy will never change, right? You can be frustrated with the man for what he's done to be able to kind of start off the Scalley era, but at the same time, you can't deny the success that he had over 21 seasons, right? Only 3 losing seasons during that time. You had success in every place that you went, whether that be the Mountain West Conference, the Pac-12 Conference, the Big 12 Conference. Utah was always near the top, right? And they didn't always win, clearly, but at the same time, they were always in contention for either a championship, playoffs, or just being one of those teams that is a consistent team. And so as you take a step back, you can still respect the legacy while still being frustrated. There's a lot of people that have really bitter feelings towards Kyle Whittingham right now, and I don't blame them, right? That's a really difficult thing to see your program suddenly gutted from a guy who said that he was going to leave the program in a better spot. There's 2 sides of this coin, right? And I understand Utah fans probably don't want to hear the other side of the coin. They don't care about that, and I think you absolutely have the right to be able to have that opinion. But at the same time, there is still the side that he still left Utah in a great spot. And I know some backdoor dealings that make this much more of a challenge and frustrating from the Scalley side of things in terms of looking at what Whittingham's trying to do and some of the players he's trying to bring to Michigan. And so there's a lot of frustrations there. But at the end of the day, this gives Morgan Scalley an opportunity to kind of put his own fingerprints on this, right? Nobody can come into this now and say, oh, he's just inheriting what Kyle left. And there's still going to be some of that, right? But at the same time, this now is a situation where Morgan can put his complete fingerprints on it. He's got a whole coaching staff that he can point to, and sure, there are some holdovers, but he's got his own stamp on the coaching staff, especially on the offensive side of the ball. He's got his own fingerprints on the recruiting front, which he already had a major part of that anyway, probably more so than Kyle Whittingham anyway. And you do that now in a situation where you're building it not quite from the ground up, right? Like this isn't Iowa State that, lost like 1 million players. This isn't West Virginia that lost 1 million players a year ago, or some other destinations that have to do a complete rebuild. So there is still some of that consistency, which leads to the Kyle Whittingham left Utah, in a much better spot than before. But at the same time, this gives Morgan now kind of the runway to say, hey, this is my program. Even more so than probably it could have been had Kyle just kind of stepped away, been on the sidelines, whether that means he worked in that consultation role or if he just kind of kept his distance. This now is fully Morgan Scalley. And so Kyle can go do what he wants to do, and you can have your opinions about that, and you're probably right or wrong. It doesn't really matter. But now it's fully embracing the Morgan Scalley era, and he gets to be that. And as that Morgan Scalley era moves, and we're going to hear about that today. This is Tuesday if you're listening to this podcast. His press conference is going to happen this afternoon. And so we'll kind of, my intention is to do another podcast later this week to really break down some of that and kind of recap some of that. But this now is his opportunity to move forward as a true Utah man, right? This is a guy that from the earliest of ages has been a Utah fan. He's been a Utah man. His dad played at the university. He's grown up coming to the stadium, watching it from afar, watching it up close, being a part of the program as a player and seeing the successes that have been had and being part of some of the most successful teams in Utah history, to being able to be coached from Ron McBride, Urban Meyer, Kyle Whittingham, and then joining alongside them and being able to be coaches and being able to build the program in a different way. This is a guy that has fully embraced Utah and what it means. And I think that from a Utah perspective means a ton for what they can do, right? It's tough to project what Scalley can be, right? Is he another 20-year coach? I think he would hope that. I think he would hope that he could build the program to a point where he can last that long. And I think if he continues along the right steps and makes the right moves, then sure, it can be that way, because he's not out there looking for another job. This is his job. This is his, whatever you want to call it, his end goal. This isn't a stepping stone position where he says, oh, I want the Michigan job, or I want the Alabama job, or the USC job. He's had many opportunities to go to many of these places, to be able to be, defensive coordinators, or to be able to start on a different path. And he's rebuffed them all and stayed at Utah, because this is where he wants to be. This is his dream job. This is what he wants to do. So you're going to get his full attention and full effort into this program. And if it fails, it's going to be his own personal failure, because that's how much he embraces it. That he doesn't want this to be a situation where Utah fails, right? He's not going into this half-assed. He's going into this in a situation where he wants to be the guy, because this means more to him than it means to many other people in that program. It's just simply because he's seen it over his 45 years grow, right? He's seen it from its lows. He's seen it from its highs. He's been a part of all of that. And so you're going to get a man that's completely committed to this program. He's said over the last couple of weeks many times that his logo has never changed and it never will. That isn't just something to say. And I know he said it quite a bit, and so it's kind of become this phrase, but at the same time, it truly means something, right? That logo means something to him that he wants to be able to have. And, that means a ton for him. Recently leading up to his press conference, you're seeing statements made from Utah, not made from Utah, but they're putting it out there from former players or other coaches such as Kenny Dillingham or Joey McGuire. Many of these are all intentional to build around him to kind of distance himself from Kyle, not in a bad way, but to distance him to say, look, this is a guy that has what it takes to be a head coach. This isn't a guy that just inherited a great program and, he's starting on third base. He is in some respects because they've built this and he's taking over a strong program. But at the same time, this is a guy that is integral in building this program. It wasn't just Kyle Whittingham. Morgan Scalley is to be credited for much of what Utah's already built. And so, this is a guy that understands it. He understands what it takes. We'll see fully what it means to have the head coach mantle on him and how he runs this program. But I think, you're going to see some differences. And I look forward to potentially hearing what some of those differences will be today in the press conference and kind of moving forward. Does he involve more fans? Is it more open? Is there differences that are there from the way Kyle Whittingham did it? This is completely a new era, and it's not just the same, Kyle Whittingham style. There are going to be some same styles, but this is going to be a completely different era. And so I look forward to see what that is, and clearly we'll document a lot of that. So let's look at some of the coaching changes and some of the personnel changes. So Utah obviously loses offensive coordinator Jason Beck. Jim Harding, the offensive line coach, follows, as well as Micah Simon, the wide receiver coach, and Freddie Whittingham, the tight end coach. Coy Detmer Jr., who was a QB analyst and kind of helping with that room, also leaves. And then you lose on the defensive side, Lewis Powell, the defensive ends coach. That one is a big loss, quite honestly. For the recruiting side of things, he is very well connected to what Utah wanted to do and just his connections, all across the country and internationally, whether that be the Poly Pipeline or in other situations. He is integral in the recruiting front. At the same time, it's not detrimental to the point that Morgan isn't going to be able to understand how to do things. It just is it's a little setback that quite honestly wasn't expected. The Jason Becks, the Jim Hardings, all that was trending that way going into the Las Vegas Bowl. This wasn't a situation that was unusual. The Lewis Powell, obviously there was a lot of conversations about him leaving as well, but it sounded like Morgan was able to do a really good job of keeping him there. Even coming into the couple days after the bowl game, it sounded like Utah was really well put to be able to keep him, and then suddenly it changed. So they all joined Kyle Whittingham at Michigan. Kind of ironic that the offensive staff followed Kyle and not the defensive staff. But, that's the way that it is. I think many of them, especially Jason Beck, can look at that as a jumping off point to be able to build his career, because there's clearly a situation where he's going to go be a head coach, whether that be at a group of 6 program or a Power 4. Obviously, if they can have success at Michigan, the chances of Power 4 program grow for him. So great opportunities for them. Obviously puts Morgan a little bit behind, expecting to have some of these coaches with him, especially Jason Beck, who was expecting to be there had Kyle just kind of stepped away. But, like I said previously, this is an opportunity for Morgan to be able to move forward with his kind of stamp of what he does on the program. Some of the holdovers, the holdovers for the program is Colton Swan, who was promoted to defensive coordinator. The worst kept secret. This is something that was just expected for a very long time, really deserving of that honor. He'll continue to maintain the linebacker position coach as well. This is a guy that is very integral in the recruiting front and what Utah's been able to do on the defensive side of the ball. He helped game plan for the Las Vegas Bowl. He may have even taken over play calling duties during that game. And so, you saw what happened and what he was able to do. And I think there's a lot of optimism about what he can do. You also keep Sharif Shah, who is the safeties coach as well as special teams coordinator. And quite honestly, Morgan Scalley's best friend. These two have been together for a very long time. They have a great connection, and to keep Sharif in the program is a great thing. His energy, his passion, his development is nothing short of great at Utah, and keeping him on the roster is a great opportunity. You get Luther Ellis on the defensive line, who obviously a guy that played for the program, has meant a lot for this program and developing the talent there. He provides a lot of consistency there in that defensive line room and being able to help there. Great addition, or great holdover from Kyle Whittingham's staff. And then Mark Ottawaya. Mark Ottawaya has been, such a fun coach that fits Morgan Scalley's personality really well. The two of them love to have fun, but they're very serious in kind of their business. And so Mark Ottawaya keeping the running back room together and being able to kind of do things there and move forward there means a lot. It keeps the vibes going, as well as just showing the serious nature of the work and being able to keep other players there, as well as being able to go out on the recruiting front and help. So, a lot of the holdovers are great opportunities for Utah to build, and really, really looking forward to kind of seeing how they work under Morgan Scalley. So with that, there's a lot of positions that needed to be hired. And, the top of that list was obviously an offensive coordinator. Offensive coordinator was going to be the position that everybody wanted to know. And coming into, coming out of the Las Vegas Bowl and losing Jason Beck, there was a lot of conversations of trying to replicate that. You also wanted to keep Devin Dampier, Bird Ficklin. You wanted to keep an offense that could fit with them. And there were many names that were thrown out there, many of which felt like they absolutely could have been, a great situation for Utah. And at the end of the day, Morgan kept it really close to the vest and decided to hire Kevin McGivern, former Utah State offensive coordinator. At the time, it felt like to many people that I saw online, this felt like an underwhelming hire because there was a lot of different names being thrown out there, maybe from bigger programs, and it's just like, oh, cool, you got the Utah State guy. But when you take a deep dive on this guy, he is a veteran guy. He's from Utah. He's all in on kind of the same style that Jason Beck ran, except in a different way. The vernacular and the playbook and everything else that way is very well connected. And so there was an opportunity here for a lot of consistency. Now, the way that McGivern and Beck approached the game were a little bit different, though the same. This was a situation where McGivern built Utah State into a pretty potent offense with the limited players that they had. This is a program that obviously has been building through the transfer portal every single year, having to basically rebuild its entire roster on a year-to-year basis, and he was able to do a ton for that program. Got him to be second in scoring offense in the Mountain West, third in total offense and passing efficiency. It's an offense that worked, especially with the personnel that he had. His philosophy, and we'll learn more about this from him and kind of how he's going to approach this with Utah, but generally speaking, this is a guy that likes to look at more of the pass first instead of what Utah has traditionally done where it's the run first, right? So you're going to get a lot more explosive plays. You're going to get a lot more stuff through the air, but that's not to say that you're abandoning the run. Bryson Barnes at Utah State still rushed for something like 700-something yards, 750, I think it was, yards up at Utah State. You give your quarterback an opportunity to keep moving forward and keep that momentum going where you can utilize his strengths in the run game, but you're getting an opportunity to be able to utilize and start first from the pass, right? Which has been one of the biggest complaints for Utah this last year, is that they weren't really a passing attack team. And whether that was Utah didn't have the wide receivers to do it or Devin Dampier wasn't the passer, I think it was more based on Utah's and / Kyle's ability to want to put the run first as kind of the option. Clearly, Jason Beck showed what he did in the Las Vegas Bowl and what Devin Dampier can be. You also saw some of the talent, whether that be J.J. Buchanan or Dallin Bentley, Creed Whittemore, or, there's, Ryan Davis. A lot of these players can be an asset in there. I'm forgetting Larry Simmons. There was a lot of opportunities there where that pass works. The difference here, though, is as part of this is Kevin McGivern is pretty adaptable in how he approaches this. This isn't a situation where, he's just going to stick with his own game plan. He says, this is it. We're going to, get the players to buy into this. like most offensive coordinators anymore, at least any worth their salt, is going to be adaptable, right? But McGivern has been much more adaptable to what his personnel is. He's still going to have his philosophies of wanting to establish the pass. He's still going to have a successful run game. He still wants to get some of those motion plays in there to try to be able to make it difficult on defenses to understand what's going on. He wants to utilize different personnel in terms of trying to line up guys that make it a challenge. You can get multiple running backs in the backfield. You then pair that with your running quarterback to be able to help that. All of that's still going to exist, but there's going to be more of an emphasis in the passing game. And that's something that Scalley wants. He wants to be able to emphasize more of the pass. He wants to be more explosive, be a little bit more aggressive, while still maintaining, the same situations of wanting to be able to be efficient with the ball. But I think you're going to see a little bit different of a philosophy while still keeping a lot of the same structure, if that makes sense. With that, other coaches that have been hired, Jordan Gross takes over on offensive line. You may know his name as a, obviously strong player that played for Utah, an all-time great. He played 11 seasons with the Carolina Panthers, and most recently he was the high school coach at Fruitland High, where, like I said, head coach, where he coached Kelvin Obot, Utah's first ever 5-star recruit, who is expected to potentially start this next year. So you get consistency from that, but there's going to be an uphill battle here, right? You got a guy that understands the position inside and out. He's done it at the collegiate level. He's done it in the NFL as genuinely one of the guys that people look to as one of the toughest guys in the league as an offensive lineman. He's coached at high school, and so there's going to be some transition changes and kind of learning opportunities at the collegiate level, but this is a guy that understands it, right? He's been able to coach guys up and be able to help that, and so you've got a guy that is going to be pretty consistent that way. You then bring back Chad Bumpus, the Taz wide receiver coach. Chad was with the Utes as the wide receiver coach for their 2 Pac-12 championship years in 21 and 22. He left Utah to go to Mississippi State, his alma mater, to coach the wide receivers, and now is coming back. And so I think he sees a clear opportunity with Morgan Scalley that, these two built a connection when they were together. Really fascinating to be able to see that they would bring him back, but I think this kind of shows that Scalley believed in him. He believed in his recruiting philosophies. He believed that he could develop talent. And now with a little bit more of an emphasis on the pass, I'm really fascinated to kind of see what this position group looks like. If Bumpus can continue to develop players, this becomes a great opportunity for Utah moving forward to really start taking the next step in what their evolution can be in terms of passing. This hasn't always been a destination for wide receivers, and so what can that be moving forward now that there is much more of an emphasis there? Now that Chad Bumpus can be a little bit more of a part of the game plan instead of just being kind of an afterthought in some respects. Then today, it's still not officially announced by Utah, but Pete Thamel reported that Luke Wells will take over as tight end coach. He was previously at Kansas State. He's also worked at Utah State, has a lot of ties to the state. This is a guy that understands recruiting in the Big 12. He understands recruiting in the state of Utah. We'll still see what this brings, but he's a veteran guy who understands things very well. In theory, you upgrade here with a guy that understands the ins and outs of the tight end position, and especially in a position group that Utah is still going to utilize, this becomes a great opportunity for Utah to be able to get there. On the defensive side of the ball, you get Enoch Brechterfield as the defensive ends coach. He's previously the defensive line coach at Baylor over the last 2 years. This is a guy that has had a ton of experience, another veteran coach out there. Coach Darren Donald, I know that's the name that everybody's throwing out there right now, and I don't know that one player makes a coach per se, but at the same time, that doesn't hurt either. So you get a guy that's going to come in there and potentially help upgrade the defensive end room and get them to where they need to be. What he's able to do with Luther Ellis and kind of building upon each other, I think that's going to be a really fascinating situation there. And then lastly, you get Derek Odom as the safeties coach. So he takes over for Morgan Scalley, who's clearly not going to be a position coach anymore. Derek Odom has previously been with San Jose State. He's been their defensive coordinator for the last 9 seasons. So you get a guy that's deciding he doesn't want to be a defensive coordinator, anymore, and he wants to come coach safeties for Utah. Now, he previously was the safeties coach at Utah from 2005 to 2007, so essentially this has gone Odom, Scalley, Odom. So there's not been a long line of coaches here that have been a difference, right? You're getting two coaches that essentially have been there since 2005. That's pretty crazy to have 20 years of just two coaches. And so I think you're going to see a lot of success there. A guy that is a Utah man, is a guy that understands the system. He understands Morgan Scalley. This has an opportunity to be pretty consistent, especially understanding now more of a defensive coordinator role where he was at San Jose State, and San Jose State was pretty solid in their defense. And so, this is another guy that has a lot of potential to improve the program and help. So by all accounts, Morgan Scalley has done a really good job in such a short time to be able to build out his coaching staff, and now becomes the real work of going into the recruiting, the retention, all that kind of stuff. And, looking at this, as I said earlier, there was expected to be a mass exodus when Kyle Whittingham went to Michigan. It's a blue blood program. There's an opportunity for players to say, hey, I loved Kyle Whittingham, and now I get an opportunity to potentially go to a blue blood. And quite honestly, that just hasn't happened. You do have 4 players of note: Smith Snowden, a corner, obviously; John Henry Daly, your star defensive end; Te'o Johnson, your starter at safety; and then Racine Guillory, a running back who was this up-and-coming kid that many fans were optimistic about. Those 4 entered the portal. There's many more, but those 4 entered the portal, and, as maybe some of your bigger names, but all 4 of those guys were entering the portal before Kyle was even announced as Michigan head coach. So I don't know that there's any big movement here simply because Kyle went to another program. These guys, very well could end up at Michigan, but Utah was expecting to lose these guys anyway. John Henry Daly, I know a lot of people will look at and say, why are you not going to throw a bag at him for what he did? The reality is he's coming off an Achilles tear. He has tweeted that he believes he's going to be ready for spring. Anybody that understands Achilles injuries understands that this is a very difficult timeline. And while he might be back in terms of just not being hampered by an injury, an Achilles injury is one you can't rush. And so I'm really fascinated to see what happens there. But at the end of the day, I think Utah took a look at it and said, hey, we're willing to pay you this much. I understand it was a competitive offer, but they're not going to overspend for a guy that they don't know is going to be fully healthy, right? I think Utah projected him to be ready this season, but not by the beginning of the season. And so that's going to be a tough situation to want to pay for a player that may or may not be ready. They saw this with Cam Rising and kind of how difficult that can be. They saw this with many other players, and it's just not something that they felt like it was worth being able to have, throw that money out there for a guy that may or may not be there. Smith Snowden, you may remember the drama from last year. Is he going? Is he not? Is he staying? All the different frustrations there. This is an opportunity for Smith if he's chasing money or chasing a different look. This is his opportunity. And I don't want to say Utah's not upset by this, because clearly, losing a talented guy who's been a starter, it hurts, right? But at the same time, they prepared for this. This is another one of those situations where they felt like they can get similar production out of guys, whether it be through the transfer portal or what they already have in the room. And so, not the biggest of blows. I'm not trying to sit here and just like wash away any of this. That it does hurt, right? Like losing key players does hurt, but I think Utah was prepared for this. Te'o Johnson, another player, maybe just an opportunity to get a different shot somewhere else. Started out his career really solid and then just had some up and down moments this last year, especially really great in coverage, but had some real struggles in tackling. I still think he's a really solid player. I think, Utah's missing out on a guy that is a great safety asset, but I think Utah has potential where they can upgrade as well. It's tough. This is the business. Utah's got to do its business as well, and so does Te'o and other players. So you got that. And then Racine Guillory, just another guy that, up-and-coming freshman. This is a guy that reclassified, so he's incredibly young. He came in essentially the year that he was supposed to be a senior in high school. He is, of that group, he's the one that has committed so far, and he's going to go to LSU. So really fascinated to see what happens there for him and kind of how that works. But there's that. As of now, the key saves that Morgan Scalley has been able to keep, it sounds like Devin Dampier and Bird Ficklin are going to stay. There's been a roller coaster ride for these two, mostly for Devin. Clearly, his offensive coordinator that he's known for a long time leaving makes that tough, right? But the situation at Michigan where Bryce Underwood is staying makes that tough on Dampier. You're not going to go your last year or potentially second to last year, depends on how this works for him, to go back up somebody, right? Especially a 5-star guy that Michigan is throwing $1 billion at. They're not, but it's a lot of money. That's a tough situation. You can see what Utah did, with him under center last year, and you can project what that can be now with a new offensive coordinator. And from all that I've heard, and Bird Ficklin may have let it slip on a live Instagram/TikTok that he's done, that the two of them are coming back. So it's still TBD. My understanding is later in this week could be an announcement. Dampier said before the bowl game, before a lot of this drama really played out, that he was hoping to do a dual video of some sort with Bird Ficklin to talk about them coming back. So I believe you're going to probably see something like that. Something could change last minute, so this is still not a guarantee, but this is a potentially great opportunity for Utah where if they can keep them, Utah can hit the ground running, not just from, on the field wise. I think Devin and what he brings, you saw the smile that he brought out in that Las Vegas Bowl. He was having a blast, and you could see that he was having fun, and that charismatic personality, which is just who he is in general, is a guy that it means a ton for the locker room, right? That's going to do a ton for what Utah wants to do, and if you can keep him in the room, that's going to mean a lot for this Utah team. Beyond that, sounds like Wayshawn Parker is going to stay. J.J. Buchanan, he has signed a re-up deal, I guess you could say, but there was a recent 24/7 Sports report, one of their Michigan people claims that Michigan feels really good about getting him into the portal and bringing him there. This is tricky. My understanding, and it's still, once again, nothing is certain until it is, that he wants to stay at Utah. He's from Las Vegas. It is close to home. His family wants him here. He wants to be here. There's always potential, though, that you can change, right? My expectation, though, is that J.J. Buchanan stays for Utah, and that, to me, becomes one of your top priorities, especially with what you saw that he did as a wide receiver, as just a freshman. There's so much room for him to grow, especially in an offense that's going to put a little bit more emphasis there. And so having him stay would be a big boon for the program, for Morgan Scalley, and really just kind of stabilize a lot of the situations there. Two other guys, incoming freshmen, Celeste Moa, obviously legacy recruit, highest recruit from the state of Utah this year, high 4-star, potential 5-star guy. He was linked to going to Michigan, and it sounded like it was all but done, especially because he's related to Lewis Powell. He was his lead recruiter. There's a lot of situations there where this felt like he was going to go to Michigan and go part of a blue blood. But as Steve Bartle tweeted yesterday and reported, Celeste Moa has enrolled at Utah and is already taking part in the program and going to school. So, yes, there's still a potential where you can enter the transfer portal, but that seems pretty unlikely. You don't generally enroll just to be able to go in the portal, especially at this late in the, not late, it's still pretty early, but it would be much trickier for him to enter the portal and do all that stuff. And so it's a pretty good sign that he's able to stay there. It's a big win for Morgan Scalley to be able to keep Celeste Moa. There's potential his brother could be joining him at Utah as well. Great opportunity for that and being able to add a boost to the wide receiver room. He's a two-way player, so we'll see what he wants to do that way. But great opportunity for a recruiting win, so to speak. And then Kelvin Obot, obviously connected to Jim Harding and kind of the success that Utah built up in the offensive line room. There was a lot of talk, mostly from the Michigan side, of wanting him, but there never felt any immediacy to that. I think Kelvin, who came and was part of the bowl game prep, has already enrolled, all that kind of stuff. It always felt like he stayed committed to Utah the entire time. Getting his head coach from high school only adds to that. So I don't think that was the thing that completely sold him, but I don't think it hurt either. And so I think Kelvin, he liked Utah. There's a reason he committed early and shut down his recruitment early. He felt confident there. But, Jim Harding moving on, there was always a chance that that could happen. So a lot of good opportunities and good wins for Morgan Scalley already. Many of these guys could have followed Kyle to Michigan, but they've been able to maintain the core of their program. Creed Whittemore already announced that he's coming back, so you get another wide receiver there. The expectation is that Larry Simmons will stay at Utah, and so you're already building out that wide receiver corps that can be pretty solid here. You have a connection with Devin Dampier. You've got a connection with Bird Ficklin. A lot of this can grow. Now you're just going to learn potentially a new offensive system that has a lot of similarities to what you've already done. So a lot of opportunities there. Lastly, the transfer portal is open. It opened on January 2nd, and it'll close on January 16th. And today is the first day that Utah has finally gotten some commits. So coming into this podcast, Utah had gotten a commitment from Marcus Wimberly. He's the safety from Oklahoma. This is a guy that is part of the 2025 recruiting class. And so, young, going to have a long tenure at Utah should he want to stay. Get him in this system, and potentially could be a great fit for Utah moving forward at safety now that Te'o's gone. I forgot to mention Nate Ritchie said he's coming back. You've got Rabbit Evans saying he's coming back, so he can add to what is being done that way, and being able to help add to that defensive back room that has been pretty solid under Scalley as well as Sharif Shah. So you get that. And then before this as well, it was Lucas Samsula, a defensive tackle from Wyoming. Pretty solid guy, 2023 recruiting class, so still a lot of upside there. You get him in there. And then as I'm recording this podcast, Ethan Day, a defensive end, from North Texas, has committed to Utah as well. So Utah now at 3 commits from the transfer portal right now, 1 from key positions that they need. There's still many more positions that Utah will take a look at, whether that be the offensive line, trying to get more wide receivers. That's going to be a big focus, but they're already hosting many players this week, and you're going to see a lot more names coming off the board here shortly. So as it stands, it seems like Morgan Scalley is off and running. Things have been really great. I know he joked in Las Vegas that he's running off of 5-hour energy drinks. If they don't have a deal for him in place, I don't know what else can be done. But I think you've got a guy that's 100% committed. You've got a guy that's been able to maintain the core of this program and be able to hit the ground running, whether that be in the coaching staff or with the players that he's bringing in. And it seems like Utah has potential to be able to move forward in a very high manner and hit the ground running for the 2026 season. So still a lot to be done. We'll document a lot of that stuff as it goes on. But I think, this is a great opportunity for Utah to move forward. There's still a lot of questions to be had, right? We still have to see how Morgan runs this system and what it means. And if he can get the players to buy in, I don't doubt that that's going to be a situation they've already bought in long ago. But, we'll see what he's like as the head man and how he's able to do that now that he gets all those responsibilities. But I think there's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of trust and faith in Scalley, and I think Utah is in a great spot right now. So we'll see what happens today with, maybe more transfers. We'll see what happens with his press conference and how he wants to operate, and we'll kind of continue to go with that. So with that, we're going to sign off today, and we'll keep this thing going. We'll continue to talk football as the year goes on. There's obviously a lot of excitement with the women's basketball team in particular, just upset number 8 team TCU. You've got gymnastics going on this week. They've got their Sprouts meet, which is against Oklahoma, LSU, and UCLA. So you've got 4 of the 5 top teams in the country competing. So a lot of fun happening up on the hill right now, and we're going to continue to document all that. So thanks for joining me today. We'll try to get back to more regularity, hopefully that my phone isn't off, being crazy, and I'm not stuck doing all that. So with that, look forward to all that's going to come. Hope you had a great New Year's, and look forward to this 2026 year, and we will sign off and talk to you later.